ESPN app. Meanwhile, we're back on a Football Friday with the coaching carousel. It is starting to spin more quickly. Peter Schrager, the Ravens have found their man. His name is Jesse Minter.
Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator from the Los Angeles Chargers, but also had a history with the University of Michigan and was with the Baltimore Ravens for 3 years in the 2010s and the early 2020s. Minter comes over there. The question now is who is going to be the offensive coordinator? As we know, Lamar Jackson is the most important person in that building. Minter comes, brings discipline, brings a true X's and O's coach who has elevated the play with the Chargers. Cliff Kingsbury's name is being tossed around a bit there, but Cliff also might be a possibility in Nashville with the Tennessee Titans with Robert Saleh or elsewhere. Vegas and Cleveland were interested in Minter. It turns out he canceled his in-person second interview with Cleveland Browns because he knew he was getting that Baltimore Ravens job.
He's a longtime Harbaugh guy, and by that we mean both Harbaughs,
yes.
Right? And he knows the Ravens organization, and that's an extremely attractive opening because of the presence of Lamar Jackson. And while we're sitting here wondering who's going to coach Lamar's side of the ball, you were saying this morning you think it's the other side of the ball that they need to get right in Baltimore.
Yeah, the last 2 years, because of Mike McDaniel and his departure going to Seattle, this defense has been atrocious. And I think it's been at the forefront of why they've been able to lose football games and actually not win them. You have a guy in Jesse Minter who was able to coach from 2017 to 2020 with Mike McDaniel on that staff. So he was able to learn from him. He went to Michigan as a defensive coordinator, won a national championship. But I'm sold on the job he's been able to do in Los Angeles with the Chargers. You have a boatload of third-round and fourth-round picks that he has been able to develop and get to play at a high level. The Los Angeles Chargers were fifth in total defense this past season, and they were the bright spot outside of Justin Herbert of that entire football team. So I love this hire by the Baltimore Ravens, and this is a Baltimore Ravens that felt like they may have missed out on Mike McDaniel because of the job he's doing.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss out two times knowing that you had a homegrown guy right there in your facility.
Oh, in the meantime, obviously all eyes then go on Lamar and all the rest of that. So what do you see for the other side? You hear the names that Peter was talking about. They need to get that side right, too.
Yeah, then that's going to be all about the relationship, right? This isn't just about necessarily who Lamar wants. You know, I understand that there have been players down there who have thrown their, opinion out there as far as Cliff Kingsbury being someone who they'd like to work with. I think it's going to be about mutual respect, accountability, in order to really bring out the very best in Lamar, hold Lamar accountable, make sure that Lamar is available. Look, injuries aside and the kind of things that happen in the normal course of football, I think this is about really trying to raise this young man's game to a point where this football team can get over the hump. Whoever they bring in has to be able to strike that special balance between holding someone accountable while at the same time being able to put your arm around them, keep them motivated, keep them playing at a high level, keep their confidence level high. This is a tricky hire. It really is, because it's really the one that can change the fortunes of this organization, even more so than the head coach.
And Bart, you're sort of a little bit of a Raven still at heart. Last year was just a bad year in so many different ways. And obviously Lamar Jackson's injuries had a lot to do with it, but they didn't feel like that was the whole puzzle. Was that a blip? Or are they going to bounce right back here now, get a couple of new coaches in there, and just boom, they're right back to being one of the best teams in the NFL? Or do you think we're looking at the signs of maybe more trouble in Baltimore?
Well, I think Harry hit the nail right on the head, and it's really about getting back to the brand of football and the identity of who the Ravens have always been. Lamar Jackson, that's a beautiful story. The first time that the Ravens have really had a franchise quarterback, no disrespect to Joe Flacco, but he was an MVP caliber type of player. But the Ravens are all about defense, physicality, running the ball. And it's time to take the governor off of Lamar Jackson. And it can't be about his athleticism and running the ball. It's got to be about him being able to have a balance, kind of like Josh Allen, running the football and not putting himself at harm's way too often because he's too important. But this is all about getting back to the brand of physical, intimidating defense. I didn't recognize that defense in the last couple of years that I've seen.
All right, you mentioned Allen. That's the next stop on our coaching carousel. We can deal with the Buffalo side of it all. And the Bills are doing something smart with all this weather that's coming up to this part of the country. They're down in Florida interviewing head coaches, beginning with Mike McDaniel. And then they'll interview Anthony Lynn, and they'll interview this young guy, Grant Udinski, that everyone seems to be very high on. We know that McDaniel, Peter, help me with this, because I had heard that he was now going to L.A. to be the offensive coordinator there, but obviously now that's pending this. So what are we looking at here?
There was always an agreement with Jim Harbaugh that I will be the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers unless I get an opportunity to be a head coach, and Harbaugh agreed to that. So now he's going to interview down there, ironically, in South Florida with the Buffalo Bills and Terry Pegula, Brandon Beane, and the Brain Trust up there. They also are going to meet with Anthony Weaver, who is a very highly viewed upon prospect as a head coach, as a former defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. And they already have met with Lou Anarumo and Brian Daboll. They are doing a wide search here. A name that's been mentioned, obviously, is Joe Brady. He's in the building. Do they want to elevate him? That hasn't happened yet. That tells me they might be looking at a lot of different candidates, and Brady might not be in the driver's seat on that one.
And so, Lewis, look, the other day was a bad day for the Bills in a million different ways, right? The owner and the president with the press conference and all that. So, full stop. That said, Josh Allen remains the quarterback. So this remains an incredibly attractive job for anyone who gets a chance to be a head coach. Who do you think is the right guy of the people that we're hearing here for them to bring in to get Allen over the top?
Wow, that's an interesting one. Look, I think Brian Daboll has to be someone that has to be high up on their ranking simply because of the relationship that he did have with Josh. And that doesn't mean Brian Daboll comes in and he's just Josh's friend and just absolutely just, bows down to every to every desire that he has as far as what the game plan looks like, what the play calls are like. It's about the relationship. It's also going to be, now quite honestly, it's going to be about the relationship that whoever the incoming head coach has with ownership. Because look, ownership didn't do themselves any favors with the way in which they talked about Keon Coleman and the situation they put Brandon Beane in. So I think that comfortability that you're going to be able to have with the owner, I think is going to be absolutely critical and important because you're having conversations with ownership all the time. I think Brian Daboll, because of his familiarity with this organization, with this area, I think to me has to be sitting right near the top.
I'm always careful with coaches that get hired right after getting fired because sometimes they don't learn from the mistakes because they say, hey, it wasn't my fault. Look, I got another job. But the same argument that you made for Brian Daboll, you can make for Joe Brady, a young guy that can be there for a long time. And we've seen Josh Allen become the MVP, not underneath Daboll, but underneath Joe Brady. Always concerned sometimes with Daboll because his lack of running the ball. Remember, Josh Allen stopped turning the ball over so much when Joe Brady created balance in the offense and didn't make it all about Josh Allen.
I would add a quick note here. All four teams remaining in the playoffs, they have coordinators on both sides of the ball, and even in Davis Webb's case, who has a connection with Josh Allen, is a coach. You cannot meet with any of these candidates at this point unless the team has been eliminated. So if the Rams win, that pushes back Shula and Schillhouse and Mike LaFleur all the way back to February 9th. Same thing with the Broncos. Same thing, of course, with the Seahawks and the Patriots.
All right, let me dive into the last one here. We'll get Harry, and that's the Eagles. They have interviewed Matt Nagy for their offensive coordinator job. This does not seem to be a job that people are clamoring for in the way that I might have expected.
Yeah, they're going to be taking their time because they haven't rushed to hire anybody either. Declan Doyle is another name who's going to get an interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're curious who that is, 29-year-old offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears this year. But there were early reports that this was going to be one of the most coveted jobs in football. It hasn't been up to this point. Names that are interviewing for head coaching jobs have withdrawn from being offensive coordinator possibilities here in Philadelphia, and you have to wonder if the media market and some of the stuff that Kevin Patullo dealt with is actually a distraction or maybe a detractor for guys who'd rather just coach in other places.
Who just made a noise?
No, I did.
Those are peoples.
Look, I don't think there's any question. I think there's going to be people who are going to take the path of least resistance or of lesser resistance when it comes to dealing with all the outside noise. And I know you can always just chalk it up to outside noise. These are human beings. People don't like getting their houses egged and being harassed by people who are disappointed in your performance. And I get it. Fans have a right to express themselves, but sometimes things, they do cross the line. And this is a tricky job. You have to have a certain level of skin thickness in order to handle this job.
That's true. What is also true is that Shane Steichen did a good job there and parlayed it into a head coaching job.
And Kellen Moore
did a good job there and parlayed it. And you don't want to be the guy who follows the guy, right? You want to be the guy who follows the guy that everybody didn't like.
Yeah.
So, and you got all this talent on that offense.
I would also say, and those two guys were able to get head coaching jobs because of how great they were at being an offensive coordinator.
Right.
Now, I would say for the next guy coming in, when it comes to head coach Nick Sirianni, are you giving them full autonomy over that offense, or is it still going to be sprinkles of what Nick Sirianni wants to run? That's the biggest question, in my opinion.
I mean, how can there not be some Nick Sirianni influence? That is his side of the ball where he developed his, his level of expertise, or where his level of expertise resides.
But that's
for
my
him to
point,
not have
Lou.
any input. I mean, then what exactly is he doing there?
So what you're saying is the
He
other
the
guy
head
will be,
damn coach.
Yeah.
But I mean,
you hear Himbo over there laughing because Himbo's like, well, I don't want Nick Sirianni involved in any of it.
Well, he did win a Super Bowl. Come on, we got to give the guy some credit.
I
But how
hear you.
ironic would it be that Brian Daboll won't be able to come there because of Saquon and how they treated him? Wouldn't that be something crazy that Saquon's not on board?
They interviewed
with Brian
Daboll. They interviewed Daboll. The question might be, does Daboll want to coach them? I don't think it has anything to do with Saquon.
I mean, what better way to stick it to the team that fired you, man? I'm all for the good stories. That's a hell of a story.
Bart is, as a linebacker, he never forgets.
Daboll, real quick, history with Jalen Hurts as well from college. So that's a connection
Alabama.
there.
Oh, at Alabama, yeah.
That makes a lot of
And
sense.
Devonta Smith.
There's like 6 degrees of separation almost everywhere in the NFL. That's kind of always been the story, and we'll see where people land in all of these jobs. This is a year where some of these coordinator jobs feel as interesting as some of the head coaching jobs. In the meantime,